The mug slipped from my fingers and shattered on the kitchen tiles. My father's voice thundered from across the room, shaking the very air. "What have you done, Sarah? Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us what would you do in this situation. Be honest. Tell me in the comments below." We read every comment. Let's begin. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just stood there, back straight, hand resting gently on my barely there belly. "I'm pregnant," I said calmly. My voice didn't shake. Not this time. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother, Lorraine, froze mid-step at the bottom of the staircase. Her face palled, her hands, still wet from folding laundry, trembled. You just turned 18. Are you insane?" My father stepped closer. His jaw clenched so tight the veins in his neck looked like they'd burst. "Who is it? Some dropout? Some stranger you met at a gas station?" He was breathing hard like my words had taken the oxygen from his lungs. "His name doesn't matter," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "What matters is I love my child and I'm keeping it." He let out a bitter guttural laugh. "You've destroyed your life, Sarah. We gave you everything. A home, a future, a college fund. And you threw it all away for this." My chest ached. But I didn't flinch. I didn't throw anything away. "You're just angry you can't control me anymore. That did it. Get out," he roared. "Pack your things. You want to play adult. Fine. Live like one." I turned to my mother. For a second, I thought she might defend me, but she didn't. She just shook her head, whispering, "You're such a disappointment, like I'd murdered someone." And that was it. They didn't ask who the father was. They didn't ask what support I had. They didn't ask if I was okay. They just kicked me out. No one knew I had already signed my lease on a small studio apartment across town. No one knew I had my own job. And certainly, no one knew the father of my baby wasn't some loser. He was someone they wouldn't believe even if I told them. I left with nothing but a duffel bag and a fire inside me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I smiled because I knew something they didn't. And 15 years later, when they'd stand in my driveway staring into the eyes of their grandson for the first time, they would finally understand the price of throwing me away. And their faces would go pale when they saw who I'd become. The first night in my new apartment was cold. No heat, no furniture. Just a secondhand mattress on the floor and a cracked window that whistled every time the wind passed. I sat on that floor with a can of soup and a silent phone. No calls from friends. Not even a text from my mom. I wasn't shocked. I had become the embarrassment. The daughter who threw her life away, but I wasn't broken. Not yet. Because I still had him, my baby. And I had a job. 3 weeks before everything exploded, I had secretly taken a receptionist position at a private medical clinic just outside Raleigh. The pay wasn't great, but the doctor who hired me, Dr. Weston, treated me like a person. He didn't care that I had just turned 18 or that I was pregnant. He just said, "If you're willing to work hard, you've got a place here." So, I showed up every morning at 6:30 a.m. and stayed till after close. My belly grew. My resolve did too. No handouts, no pity. At night I studied accounting, business, law, economics. Whatever free courses I could find online. I wasn't just going to survive. I was going to become someone they'd never see coming. I stopped checking my old social media. Watching my cousin Sierra post graduation photos while my mom liked every picture hurt more than I admitted. I muted everything. At 7 months pregnant. I worked at the clinic desk during the day and answered phones for a call center at night. One day, I collapsed outside the bus stop. I hadn't eaten, hadn't slept. I was barely 20 years old and already drowning. Dr. Weston found me outside, shivering, crying quietly, and holding my stomach. He called a nurse, canceled his patients, and sat beside me. "You okay, Sarah?" "No," I whispered, "but I will be." He didn't ask questions. He just nodded. Then he handed me something, a letter of recommendation. "Give this to her," he said, "my sister. She runs the finance office at Harrington Medical HQ." I stared at him. "Why are you helping me?" He smiled. "Because you remind me of someone I once gave up on. I don't make that mistake twice." That moment changed my life. 2 months later, I had my son Landon. I held him in my arms and cried harder than I ever had. Not because I was scared, not because I felt alone, but because this beautiful boy with his curious eyes and tiny fists made every minute of struggle worth it. And from that day forward, I swore he will never feel unwanted. Not like I did. What came next was years of sacrifice, hunger, sleepless nights, and a plan. Because if they thought I'd disappear, they had no idea who I was becoming. I didn't have a roadmap. Just a baby boy, a part-time job, and a burning determination they never expected from the girl they kicked out. Landon was barely 2 months old when I started working nights again. This time remotely, typing reports and sorting billing records for Harrington Medical's finance office. Dr. Weston's sister Evelyn gave me a shot. She didn't hand me a title or a salary I didn't earn. She just said, "Don't miss deadlines. Don't make excuses and don't wait for anyone to save you." And I didn't. I breastfed Landon between midnight reports, took data entry jobs on the weekends, taught myself how to manage budgets, audit spreadsheets, and write contracts. I even started dressing differently when I went into the office. Clean-fitted blazers I found at thrift stores, low-heeled shoes, and quiet confidence. People stopped looking at me like a teenage mistake. They started treating me like a woman with purpose. By the time Landon turned 2, I had moved us into a small townhouse near the edge of Chapel Hill. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. A place with clean floors, a small yard, and a door no one could kick me out of. I framed a picture of Landon's first birthday and placed it by the entryway. Every time I came home after a long day, it reminded me why I never gave up. Meanwhile, my parents' silence. No calls. No letters, no attempt to find out if I was alive. But I knew through other channels. Through gossip and holiday newsletters my aunt would email without thinking that their lives went on as if I never existed. My younger cousin got into Duke. My brother married a corporate lawyer, and every post, every family gathering looked polished and proud. No one mentioned me. I was the closed chapter until one day the chapter reopened itself. I was 26, sitting in a meeting with Evelyn and 2 executives from Harrington's regional division when she slid a folder across the table. "We're launching a new division," she said. "You've been working in the shadows long enough, Sarah. It's time you took charge." I blinked. "Took charge how?" She smiled. "You're being promoted, head of operations. Starting salary $138,000. Full benefits. You'll lead a team of 12. And yes, Landon can stay at the in-office daycare." I covered my mouth and stared down at the offer. I couldn't speak. "You've earned every cent of this," she said, leaning in. "And before you even think of saying no, don't. We need someone like you. And so does Landon." The moment I walked out of that office, I called Landon's school. Told them I'd be picking him up early and drove straight there. He was 8 now. Wild brown curls, sharp green eyes, and the same smile that used to keep me going through graveyard shifts. "Where are we going?" he asked, buckling his seat belt. "Home," I said, smiling. "Our new home." That night I signed a lease for a property in the historic district. 3 bedrooms, high ceilings, a garden in the back. I paid in full, no mortgage. But I wasn't finished yet, because there was one part of my story I hadn't written yet. I had kept Landon's father a secret from everyone. Even Landon. But not because he was dangerous or shameful. Because he had trusted me with privacy. You see, the man I had fallen in love with all those years ago wasn't some teenage fling. He was a first-year med resident from Johns Hopkins doing rotations at the clinic where I worked. We met once, shared something real, but his family disapproved of me. Poor, young, alone. He moved to Boston 2 weeks later, and when I told him I was pregnant, he did something I'll never forget. He offered money. I said no and never called again because I didn't want Landon to be a transaction. I wanted him to be mine. Now, 15 years had passed since my parents threw me out. And suddenly last fall, a letter arrived at my office front desk. It was from them. My mother's handwriting, shaky, almost unreadable. "Sarah, your cousin told us you live nearby. We didn't know how to reach you. We would like to see you and meet your son. Please, if you're willing to talk." I sat in my office chair for almost an hour just staring at that envelope. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just felt something cold. Not because they were reaching out, but because they had no idea what they were about to walk into. And when I invited them to my home the following Saturday, I didn't warn them. I didn't tell them what I did for a living. I didn't mention the house or Landon's perfect manners, or the life I built with the very hands they said were only meant for failure, because I wanted them to see it to walk through. The very same door they slammed in my face, and go pale with regret. I heard their car pull up 10 minutes early. Of course they were early. My father, Daniel Carter, was the kind of man who liked to control every moment of his own narrative. The kind who wanted to arrive rather than be received. And now, 15 years later, he was standing on my porch with my mother beside him, both dressed like they were visiting a country club. Not the daughter they disowned. I saw them through the tall window beside the door. My mother clutched her purse tight, her eyes scanning the garden, the porch swing, the polished brick step. Her mouth moved slightly, whispering something to him. Maybe a warning, maybe a prayer. I opened the door before they knocked. My father stiffened. My mother's jaw dropped slightly. I had changed so much. I could see it confused them. I wasn't a scared girl in a hoodie dragging a duffel bag across the lawn anymore. I stood taller, sharper, confident without needing to pretend. My tailored cream blouse, black slacks, and the soft pearl necklace Landon bought me on my last birthday said everything they needed to know before I ever opened my mouth. "Sarah," my mother breathed. Her voice was soft, careful. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. They didn't know how to react. The house was quiet, warm, elegant. Light spilled through sheer curtains glowing over hardwood floors, and hand-framed photos lining the walls. Everything smelled faintly of fresh coffee and lavender. "Ness place," my father muttered. But it wasn't a compliment, it was confusion. How could she afford this? How did she get here without us? I didn't answer the question. He didn't ask. "Landon's upstairs. He'll be down in a minute." They stood in the center of my living room, eyes darting around like strangers in a museum, terrified they'd bump into something too expensive to touch. "I wasn't sure you'd respond," I said. My mother looked at me. She blinked twice and then she said it. "We were wrong." I stayed silent. "We thought we were protecting you," she continued. "We thought if we were hard, you'd change. We didn't know you'd actually leave." "That was the point," I said quietly. There was no venom in my voice, no sarcasm, just truth. My father shifted uncomfortably, crossing his arms. "You were just a kid. You had no plan. I had a child," I interrupted, "and a job and a spine." He looked away. The silence between us stretched thick with 15 years of everything unsaid. And then footsteps on the stairs. Landon appeared, dressed in his pressed navy blue sweater and jeans, his hair combed. His expression calm and curious. He was tall for his age, broad-shouldered, kind-eyed. He looked like someone you'd trust. He looked like someone who had been loved deeply, fully, and without condition. "Landon," I said, "these are your grandparents." He blinked, then walked down the last step and stood beside me. "Hi," he said simply. My mother's hand went to her mouth. Daniel took half a step forward, his lips parting. But what hit them wasn't just his resemblance to me. It was the photographs he carried in his hands. Ones he had pulled from the cabinet while they stood there. He handed one to my mother. It was Landon standing beside a tall man in a white coat. "That's my dad," he said proudly. "He's a cardiovascular surgeon in Boston. He visits during the summers and sends me books every month." My mother nearly dropped the photo. And then, before they could say anything, Landon pulled another frame from the cabinet and held it out. It was me standing behind a podium with the Harrington medical logo surrounded by a board of directors. "Mom's the head of operations," Landon said with a small smile. "She runs everything." That's when it happened. My father's face dropped visibly audibly like the air had been punched out of his lungs. He stumbled back a half step, his hand gripping the back of the couch. "You," he whispered. "You build all this." I looked at him. My voice was calm. But beneath it was every sleepless night, every insult, every lonely birthday, every moment they thought I wouldn't make it. "No," I said, "I built myself." The room was so quiet you could hear the wind brush against the windows. My father hadn't sat down. He couldn't. His pride wouldn't let him. And his legs looked too weak to hold the weight of what he was seeing. My mother, still clutching the photo of Landon and his father, slowly lowered herself onto the edge of the couch. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but nothing came out. Landon stood calmly beside me, folding his hands like the polite, well-raised young man he was. He didn't look confused. He didn't look scared. He looked like he knew he had always known that the two people standing in his mother's living room had chosen to be strangers in his life. And now they were standing in a house they didn't build, looking at a boy they didn't raise and a woman they had tried to erase. My father finally cleared his throat. I didn't know you were in contact with him, with the boy's father. I wasn't, I replied. Not for a long time. He wanted to be there, but I told him no. I wanted Landon to grow up knowing stability. Security, no broken promises. When Landon turned 10, I let them meet slowly on my terms. My mother spoke then, her voice trembling. He's beautiful, Sarah. Thank you, I said quietly. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. We made a mistake. I didn't respond because the words were too late. My father suddenly snapped, his voice rising, not with anger but desperation. You could have called. You could have come back, we would have helped. No, you wouldn't have, I cut in sharply. You told me to leave. You didn't ask if I had a plan. You didn't even ask if I was safe. You assumed the worst and made sure I knew I wasn't wanted. My voice cracked. Then the years caught up to me, not in weakness, but in finality. You kicked out your daughter on the worst day of her life, and now you want to sit on the couch she bought and pretend none of it happened. My mother started to cry. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry for everything. I looked down at her, and for the first time in 15 years I felt nothing. Not hate, not anger, just closure. I nodded slowly. I forgave you a long time ago, I said. But that doesn't mean we go back. My father looked stunned. Sarah, this house has no room for shame. Dad, I raised a boy who knows how to respect women. Who knows love isn't conditional. I became the woman you didn't believe I could be. And now you're standing in my home, breathing air I earned, looking at a life I fought for. I turned to Landon. Go get your coat, sweetheart. We're going to the bookstore. He nodded and quietly walked upstairs, his footsteps light as feathers. My mother looked up, wiping her tears. Will we see you again? She asked. I paused. Then I looked her straight in the eyes. That depends, I said, on whether you want to meet your grandson or keep pretending the past never happened. And with that, I walked them to the door. They stood there for a moment, silent, stunned, still pale. I didn't hug them. I didn't say goodbye. I just closed the door softly behind them, and for the first time in 15 years, it was me who stood on the inside of the house, with everything they once thought I'd never.